look, you've been fired. What's your reaction to that, and how are you feeling right now?
I'm definitely hurt. I love Google, and I've always been a fan of Google even before I joined. And so it really feels like they betrayed me in some way.
Why do you feel betrayed?
Because the whole point of my memo was actually to improve Google and Google's culture. And they just punished me and shamed me for doing it.
Has any of the feedback that you've gotten changed your position at all?
So I actually published it about a month ago. And throughout that period, I continuously updated it and did take in a lot of feedback. And so what the document now is what I largely believe is the scientific consensus for a lot of these issues. And so I have taken in a lot of feedback.
So you put this up a month ago. Did any executives come to talk to you? I'm just curious if there was any, follow-up within the organization at the highest levels.
No, so I shared it with many of our diversity programs, and with individual Googlers, but no one high up ever came to me and said, no, don't do this. Even though there were many people that looked at it, it was only after it got viral that the upper management started shaming me and eventually firing me.
Do you regret anything that you did in this whole process?
It's hard to regret it just because I do believe that I'm trying to make Google and the world in general a better place by not confining us to our ideological echo chambers where only one side of the story can be heard and it's totally intolerant to other viewpoints and even scientific evidence.
What scientific evidence are you talking about? Because in the follow-up to your piece, there have been plenty of discussion about this, and discussion about the fact that there is no research to support this idea that there are biological causes for the lack of women in tech or the lack of women in leadership positions. I spoke to Megan Smith, who worked at Google, who was the former CTO for the United States, and she said that this is a myth.
Among psychologists, there's a consensus that prenatal testosterone does affect a lot of personality traits, and in particular, one's interest in people versus things. And I'm not saying that all men are different than all women, just that there's a distribution of these personality traits, and that distribution differs between men and women. And so there are very many capable women at Google, and I'm not trying to say that any of them are any worse than average male engineer at Google. Just I was trying to address why we don't have equal representation from the population. And it's largely because of the differing interests in people versus things, which is linked to prenatal testosterone.
Susan Wojcicki wrote a very impassioned response to this, and she said that your memo, had it been about Black people or Latinos or the LGBT community, that you wouldn't have anyone defending you. How do you respond to that?
So I think that that's just a false analogy, and she's trying to lump me in with racists and other bigots, which I'm not. I'm not a sexist, and I'm not a racist. So I think that that's just trying to smear my image rather than actually looking at the evidence. Very little of the responses have been actually looking at the science. They've just been calling me names or nitpicks of, oh, the formatting was a little wrong, or the original leaked document that someone else leaked didn't have any citations when my original document did.
James, the alt-right has turned you into a hero. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you identify with that group?
So I don't really identify with the alt-right. I'm more of a centrist, and I don't think that we should have such a strong ideology that really divides different people. I think that there's a lot more that we can do to try to bring people together. And so I'm very sympathetic to maybe some of the same struggles that especially some of the conservative people at Google faced.
Can you give us any specifics about hiring and diversity practices that you felt were wrong or felt were illegal?
So there were several hiring practices that treated people differently based on what their race and gender are. And
how so?
So, for example, making it easier for someone to get into Google based on what their race or gender is.
How would Google make it easier for those people to get in the door? What hiring practices did you see that would make it easier for a woman or an underrepresented minority to get through the door?
Yes, so there are several things. They can be given a different number of interviews. So for example, say I get a bad interview, then I'm just forgotten by Google. But then they can actually give certain people multiple interviews in case the first one was bad. Also, within the team hiring process, so once you get in, you still need to be chosen by a manager. And some people get into Google, but then they actually never get matched to a manager. And so they never actually get a job. And so there are certain practices within that help certain people.
You're arguing for ideological diversity and ideological inclusion. Don't you think that extends to women and minorities and all kinds of people? Google is making products for the world. Don't you need to have all kinds of people making those products?
So, yes, I support diversity and inclusion. And I think that also our lack of ideological diversity has actually hurt our project or our products. And it makes us think that, for example, just the stereotype that all conservatives are stupid, for example, that is widely held within very left-leaning circles. And that has hurt us. It makes us alienate large portions of the population.
Susan Wojcicki, in her op-ed, talked about how her daughter was asking her whether there are biological causes for the lack of women in tech. The things that you said are being conveyed to the next generation, and we've talked a lot about the importance of getting more women into technology. Do you have a concern that your views could discourage young women and young girls from entering technology?
No, because a lot of what I was just saying was that there are simply fewer women that want to get into these fields. But if you're a girl and you're interested in technology, then that's great. I mean, there aren't that many people in general that are interested in technology. It's not as if 50% of the male population is in tech. You know, it's still a very small percent of the population. And so if anyone is interested in technology, they should just pursue it. It's a great field.